Alrighty, welcome in everyone to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. I'm your host as always, Tommy Brzee. It is October 29th, a Wednesday around here, and we got a lot to get into. It's a big Week 10 on the slate, maybe not the one that we expected going into the season. A lot of ranked games that are no longer quite as big as they once were, but a ton of big ones nonetheless. We'll get into those to start. Vanderbilt goes to Texas, a huge one over there. Maybe no Arch Manning in that game. Oklahoma, Tennessee. We got USC-Nebraska. We got Cincinnati-Utah in the first segment here. Then we got some upset alerts all over the place. I think Georgia might be in a little bit of trouble. Texas Tech, Georgia Tech in quite a bit of trouble going up to Raleigh to face North Carolina State. And then you got a little bit of a whip around of some of the games we thought might have been a little bit bigger. Penn State, Ohio State kind of takes the cake there, but Arizona State, Iowa State, still an interesting game, but maybe not the juice that we thought we were going to have going into the season on that one. But let's go ahead and jump in because we got four big games. As far as I'm concerned, we have four games that kind of stand above the pack at least this week. It's kind of a weird week where you don't have that absolute marquee game, but I think these four games are just a little bit different than the rest of them. And let's go ahead and start with Vanderbilt going over to Austin, Texas to take on a team that escaped the last 2 weeks. Now, this is going to be the first time they're playing in Austin since September 20th when they faced off against UTEP. It's been a while since Texas has be able to play at home. The problem with that is it doesn't sound like Arch Manning is going to be able to go in this game. Went down late against Mississippi State with a concussion, is in concussion protocol right now. It sounds like he's progressing pretty well, but it also sounds like they're not going to force the issue there. So it could very well be Matthew Caldwell. Obviously made that nice throw late in that game against Mississippi State. Has come in spot duty from time to time. Is an athletic kid. Absolutely can make some plays with his legs. Not quite the player that Arch Manning is for obvious reasons, but is someone that can execute this offense. Everyone else around him is going to have to play a whole lot better, especially that offensive line, because he can't quite do the things off schedule that Arch Manning shown he can be able to do late in that Mississippi State game. I mean, he kind of put the offense on his back in some respects. He was escaping dirty pockets. He was making throws while getting hit. He was doing everything that offense needed him to do. Can Matthew Caldwell do that? Probably going to need quite a bit of help from the run game with C.J. Baxter, hopefully a little bit more healthy, and Trey Wisner, that group probably as healthy as they've been the entirety of the year. Maybe that's the difference in this game against a very good run defense against Vanderbilt. But Vanderbilt's been really good against the run, as we talked about. They're going to push the game into Matthew Caldwell's hands. It's going to fall on Steve Sarkisian in this one. It's going to have to be a great game plan to make sure that kid does not get heat up every single second and doesn't have a couple of mistakes, because this is the biggest game he's played in his college career. It's going to be a massive one for him, and it's going to be a really, really interesting thing to watch. The other side of the ball might be a little bit more interesting, frankly. The Texas defense played bad football for the first time, I think, all year. That Florida game was a little bit shaky, but not necessarily terrible. They got ripped a little bit against in that Mississippi State game, gave up 38 points for the first time in a very long time around there. They don't usually play consecutive poor defensive games. I don't think it's really happened since Steve Sarkisian's first year there in 2021. So at the end of the day, the question is, can they just get back on track? And I do think the pace of Mississippi State really did hurt them. Mississippi State towards the top in the country when you talk about plays per game. Vanderbilt very near the bottom of the country with only about 60 per game. So that both means the defense of Texas should be more equipped to rotate in, to play around with guys, and to be able to hold up against this offense, but also means you're going to have less possessions on offense for the Texas side. So you got to take advantage of the chances that you have. Without Arch Manning, it's going to have to be Matthew Caldwell making some big plays in this football game. But there's got to be a run game to go along with it. It is not an easy team to run against. They do a very, very good job of filling holes. They do a great job of game tackling. All the second and third level players play really, really fast and really strong. They got to find a way to run the ball, though. Texas cannot go through this game just saying Matthew Caldwell's got to win every single time. On the other side of the ball, I think for Vanderbilt, you got to find an explosive play through the air. If you can't find one, and that's really, really hard to find against this Texas team, you're not going to have any real success running the football in terms of explosives. You were able to find one against Missouri. This is a better run defense than Missouri that you're going to face against Texas. And in the past game, you might be able to find an opening here or there. You're probably not going to find it on the ground. So that one explosive that could totally change the game, probably going to have to come through the air for the Vanderbilt Commodores if they're going to find one. But this is a really interesting battle because I do think you have a Texas team that understands that they're going to have to play with the backup quarterback, and that can obviously bring out kind of two things in teams. It tends to, if your team has a good culture and your team is a good team, quote unquote, you have the ability to kind of fill the gaps with everyone else. The defense plays at higher level, the running backs, the coaches, the wide receivers, everyone just kind of ups their game because they know they need to with the backup coming in. The other side of that is Vanderbilt knows that this guy is not Arch Manning. He's not going to be able to do all of the things Arch Manning can do. He's plenty athletic. He's not Arch Manning athletic. So they do have the ability to possibly get after him with Miles Capers and some of these really, really talented guys on the edge. I think is going to be really, really tough. I think it's going to be really hard for the Texas offense to really get going in this game, and I think there's going to be a moment or two where the Texas edge rushers are playing really, really well, holding everything in, and then they overcommit one time, kind of like in that LSU game, and Diego Pavia makes one big play. I'm going to take Vanderbilt to win this one 20-17. I think it's a very, very tough game. I think they go back and forth. I think you see Texas play a little bit better around Matthew Caldwell than they have in the past around Arch Manning. I just don't think it's enough. I think Vanderbilt has enough to at least play this game on their terms and get out with a win, even if it is against a backup quarterback. If Arch Manning plays, maybe that's a different conversation, but I don't expect that to be the case, at least as of right now. Oklahoma goes on the road to Tennessee, and this is an outright elimination game for the playoff. One of these teams will be knocked out on Saturday. One of these teams will still be alive, and Oklahoma really needs it because they have a lot of tough games coming up, and this season could spiral in a hurry if they were to fall in this game. For this game, it's a really interesting fight, and it kind of resembles what happened with Ole Miss Oklahoma a week ago, where Tennessee, elite offense, kind of a sketchy defense. Some playmakers, but not necessarily the elite 11 defense that a lot of other teams have in this conference. On the Oklahoma side, a great defense, but really inconsistent offense, and a defense that did get taken advantage of just a little bit last week against Ole Miss. So the big question here is, which one of those can take advantage? Can the Oklahoma offense take advantage of a poor defensive unit for Tennessee, or can the Tennessee defense, kind of get after this Oklahoma offense a little bit more aggressively with those edge rushers? Because that's probably the biggest mismatch in this football game is the Tennessee pass rushers against this Oklahoma offensive line. They've started to play better, but they're still very young. They have a lot of really talented guys that I think in 2026 and beyond are going to be some of the best units in the country, but it's going to take time. And you have Joshua Josephs, you have very, very talented guys on the other side, Tyree West, that are going to make your life a nightmare. I think that's going to be a really, really tough battle for them. The other side of the ball, can Oklahoma get after Joey Aguilar? He's been incredible the last couple of weeks, leads the SEC in passing yards, but at the end of the day, if you can get after him, there are a couple of mistakes to be had. There are a couple of moments where they could take the ball away and totally change this thing. I think there's one of these moments in every season where Oklahoma went up against a team last week that just had the ability to poke at their small holes. I really think this defense is very, very strong, but their back end has those very, very small holes that you can poke at. The Tennessee downfield passing game is downright elite. They absolutely can tear you apart if they are given time. So that's the big time question here. Kind of the same thing applies for Oklahoma. If you can keep John Mateer upright, there should be plenty of chances for you to attack this team downfield and make a couple of big-time plays. But when I really look at this game, I'm talking about, can the Tennessee defense make more plays, or can the Oklahoma offense make more plays? And normally, or earlier in the season, I would have told you the Oklahoma offense. I think Joshua Josephs and Tyree West are difference makers enough to where they can create a little bit of chaos. John Mateer doesn't feel fully comfortable in the pocket. He makes a couple of the mistakes that we've seen over the last couple of weeks. And I think Tennessee wins this one, 33-24. I think maybe it looks a little bit better on the scoreboard than it actually was. I do think this is going to be a four-quarter fight. But at the end of the day, I think this is going to be a really, really fun game. I just think Tennessee is peaking at the right moment. I think that team could very well run the table and be one of the teams in the SEC that makes the CFP. USC goes on the road to Nebraska, one that they absolutely need. That is absolutely another CFP elimination game because everyone is fighting for that fourth Big Ten spot. You got, in my estimation, you got USC, Nebraska, Michigan, Washington, and Iowa all playing for one spot. At least at the end of the day, I think all of them could get no spots. It could just be 3 teams from the Big Ten. But at the end of the day, it feels like those teams are all playing for that 4th spot. This one's going to eliminate one of these teams from the contention. USC has been kind of finding itself. Obviously, that Notre Dame game did not make them look great, especially defensively. But at the end of the day, this is a team that's slowly kind of finding that physicality edge, slowly building themselves up to what a Big Ten roster, what a Big Ten team normally is. The other part of this is Nebraska's been really good at eliminating big plays through the air. They have one of the better back ends in the entire country. They haven't seen Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane, and that's the big-time question to me. You know, was Michigan's passing attack nearly what you're going to face against USC? Absolutely not. This is a very special offense that is going to push the ball downfield. You are going to have one-on-one opportunities against Makai Lemon, against Jacoby Lane. You're going to have to make a play, and that is a very tough thing to do against this USC offense. But on the other side, the USC defense has struggled at different times this year, especially if you can keep your quarterback upright. They have 21 sacks on the year, so that's the way that they really make plays defensively. If you are able to keep Dylan Raiola upright, I think you're going to have plenty of openings against this back end of this defense to make a ton of big-time plays. I think CJ Carr had openings. They didn't necessarily have to go away from Jeremiah Love too much in that football game. So at the end of the day, can Emmett Johnson kind of fill that gap? You know, can he do what Jeremiah Love did to the Trojans? Probably not to that degree, but at the very least, he can totally change this game, go for over 100 yards on the ground, maybe a couple of scores, just kind of make this game played on Nebraska's terms in their own house. That's the big-time thing here is I think Nebraska's just got to control this game. They got to make sure that they can run the football, they got to keep Dylan Raiola upright, and they got to avoid the big play from USC. Here's the problem. I think USC coming off a bye is a little bit different. I think whenever you watch these elite offensive minds, like a Lincoln Riley, like a Steve Sarkisian, like a Lane Kiffin, coming off a bye, they always have something prepared. And I think USC understands that this is probably their last chance to find a way to the CFP this year. I think they find a way to do it. I think Nebraska's been playing iffy football the last couple of weeks. I think USC wins this one 34-27. I think they make enough big plays through the air, and I think that Nebraska offensive line struggles just enough with USC to where they can't quite get enough offense in this game. I think it's a really fun back and forth, and one of these teams is walking out totally eliminated from the CFP. I'll say it's going to end up needing Nebraska, but it's going to be a fight in Lincoln. And then finally, Cincinnati goes on the road to Utah. This is a huge one in the Big 12. One of these teams probably will be eliminated. Now, Cincinnati doesn't have a loss in conference, so they're still firmly in this thing. It totally depends on how the rest of it plays out, and there's quite a few teams that are still alive for this thing. You still have BYU undefeated. They play Texas Tech here coming up. Texas Tech we'll talk about in the next segment. Got an interesting game against Kansas State this weekend, but overall, this is going to be an interesting fight. Utah has to stay alive. If they're going to stay alive, they got to win this one. For Cincinnati, I think if they win this one, they are firmly on their way to Arlington. There are some tough games. There are some sketchy games going forward. There are no games that they shouldn't be favored in. The interesting thing about this one is the line. Utah favored by 9.5 going into this football game. What do the odds makers know about this Cincinnati team going west? Because this is a very, very interesting team where I think a lot of people are cooling on Utah for good reason. They have kind of fallen just a little bit, didn't quite do enough in that BYU game, shot themselves in the foot a couple of times. One thing to keep your eye out on here is the Cincinnati defense has played really poorly against quarterbacks that can run the football. Those quarterback runs have done really, really dangerous things in just about every single game they've played this season. Devon Dampier can absolutely do that. He can make some really special plays with his legs. And the other part is the Cincinnati defense, they can be had. There's openings against that defense. Now, the question is, can you make sure that Devon Dampier stays upright? Because they have 17 sacks, they have 6 forced fumbles, but they only have 1 INT. So you have the ability, if you keep him upright, to attack that back end and probably not have one taken back from you. So that's the big time question. There's a ton going into this game. Cincinnati with a lot of juice for kind of the first time in quite some time. Frankly, wish this one was a little bit earlier because a lot of people should be watching Brendan Sorsby right now. But at the end of the day, this is going to be really, really interesting. I'm going to take the why am I blanking on his name? I'm going to take Kyle Whittingham's team with their back up against the wall. I think this team is a little bit of a difference maker. I think they avoid mistakes. I think the quarterback run game plays a huge difference in this one. and I think Utah gets the win. I think the Big 12 is just a little bit too crazy to go on the road and get a big-time win over a downright desperate team in Utah. So I think we got those 4 games. I think those 4 games stand out to me just a little bit over the rest of the pack. There's a lot of really big upset alerts, and I got 6 here. I think I could have put 8 or 10 on this list, frankly, but I got 6 here that we'll talk about right after this, so stick with us.